The incredibly rich debate that I followed both online and upon arrival on the implications for human rights, broadly conceived, of Brexit and the Brexit negotiations and outcomes of those negotiations. I very much enjoyed the very sophisticated discussion that took place, which contemplated the various thorny obstacles that are going to be faced along the way, and quite extensive legal and technical analysis within those. So what I'm proposing to do is just very briefly take a step back and reflect a little bit on what unites the sort of Euroscepticism that underpins both the sentiments against the EU and the sentiments against the European Convention on Human Rights, which is not a creature of EU law, but which shapes the human rights that are currently protected in the UK under the Human Rights Act, and which I think is also potentially a prospective victim of some of the Euroscepticism that underpinned Brexit. The European Convention on Human Rights, which has formed the on-off target of attack by the current Prime Minister of the UK, Theresa May, has been the subject of attack in the sense of the human rights that it enshrines being unpacked in a potentially overly expansive way by the European Court of Human Rights, and in a way which has entailed the protection of particularly unpalatable people or unpopular people like convicted criminals, foreigners, terror suspects, and welfare scroungers, among others, as they have been referred to, or in the more elaborate language of the Daily Mail, criminals and parasites. What I think unites the Eurosceptic attitudes, both against the EU and the ECHR, are two things. One, a sovereigntist attitude that perhaps has an element of neo-imperialism to it, that the UK can do perfectly well without those European technocrats or those European judges over there telling us what to enshrine in our laws and what human rights to protect and for whom. Because the UK has done things right for centuries, including doing rights right. And there's no need to assume that parliamentary sovereignty is not going to continue to ensure that people's rights and fundamental standards are protected within the UK without these European institutions over there. The second dimension that unites the anti-Europe, anti-human rights rhetoric is, I think, what we might call now, looking at the globe as it is, the politics of othering. The idea that there are certain people that are deserving beneficiaries of the law and of human rights in particular, and there are certain people that are undeserving beneficiaries of the law and of human rights in particular. What do I think we should do about these two aspects that threaten not only, of course, our relationship with the EU as it has been manifested in the Brexit referendum, but also the relationship of the UK with the European Convention on Human Rights? Well, I think that we actually need to stand by the politics of human rights more broadly and defend them at their core. This entails that we need to defend the counter-majoritarian character of human rights that actually might protect people who are unpalatable, who fall through the cracks of the political process, as against the wishes of the majority or the preferences and convenience of the government. And we need to stand against the politics that others certain people and that essentially sees them as undeserving beneficiaries of certain fundamental rights. And in order to do that, we need to take a step back and be prepared to actually defend some of the people that find themselves in quite a marginalized or even vilified position within our political system. This will be an enormous challenge, and I think we need to take it up earnestly. And that might also mean not necessarily privileging and prioritizing the human rights of EU citizens only, but actually paying attention to non-EU citizens who probably have a thing or two to tell us as well about the challenges ahead, and to stand in solidarity with them, with the non-EU citizens as well as the EU citizens, and others who have been othered by the system in many ways, and try to find a way to reinvigorate the egalitarian humanism of human rights and to some extent of the promise and aspiration of the European human rights project.